It looks like our numbers are starting to slow down just a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our session, Thriving in Community, How Peer Support Can Empower LGBTQ plus individuals. We are joined here today by two of our incredible MHA youth leaders. I am Jackie Zimmerman. I'm the manager of our public education partnerships and e-learning at MHA's national team, and I'll just be here to help monitor the chat, to help moderate the session, do Q&A, but all of the really great information will be coming from our two speakers here. I have just a few notes before we get started. This meeting is being recorded and will be emailed out to all registrants within 1 week. We currently do not offer CEUs, but if you would like to request a certificate of attendance, we do have a link for you to request one. That will all be sent in your follow-up email, so keep an eye out for that. We will have some time at the end of today's session for Q&A with our speakers, so please, as we're going, feel free to put your questions in the chat. We always encourage you to use the chat, asking questions, adding in resources, making comments, always being respectful. So we appreciate your participation in advance. Thank you. And I love seeing the chat already going off, hearing from where everyone's joining from. Like I said, we are joined by two incredible youth leaders. We had a third who's not able to join us here today, but we want to acknowledge Isaac's incredible work in this space as well. But with us, we have Quinn Maris, who is a part of our youth Policy Accelerator and Youth Leaders Council, and we have Deb Coffey. So welcome, Quinn and Deb. We are so thrilled to have you joining us here today. If you didn't know at MHA, we have these two programs, the Youth Policy Accelerator, the Young Leaders Council. They are programs where we're working with young people who are in the space already doing incredible work in mental health, and we are able to help them grow, amplify their message. And today you'll be able to hear from two of our astounding youth leaders. For today, what we are hoping that you leave with is that understanding of the unique value of inclusive peer support for LGBTQ plus youth, how shared lived experience create powerful and healing connections, that you'll be able to identify practical strategies for adapting existing peer support programs to be more welcoming and more responsive to LGBTQ plus youth needs. And also we're going to explore some successful models of LGBTQ plus led peer support initiatives, learn from how these approaches were implemented and maybe could be implemented in various community settings. So a lot to cover today. I will hand it over to Quinn and Deb to get us started. Welcome.
So hi everyone, my name is Deb Coffey, and I'm a respite peer supporter at Peer Support Space, and I wanted to get into the roots of peer support. So peer support has deep roots in the consumer, survivor, and ex-patient movement of the 1960s and 1970s because there's limited investment in community-based resources, and there's organizing for deinstitutionalization because of the harsh treatments that folks were facing when it came to seeking mental health care or being forced into mental health care. And also throughout this movement, there was the mainstream coverage of inhumane treatment that was taking place. So within this movement, there was reforming and challenging systems that excluded the voices of people with lived experiences of mental health conditions, and it led to building outside of systems, creating alternatives when traditional services fell short. Next slide, please. Oh, next slide. So in peer support, people who share common experiences or face similar challenges come together as equals to give and receive help based on the knowledge that comes through shared experience. And that's through Darby Penny, through defining peer support implications for policy, practice, and research. Next slide. And I'll pass it over to Quinn.
Yeah, so hi, my name is Quinn. I use they, them pronouns. So mental health and LGBTQ has had a very parallel history of being excluded from community and common spaces. LGBTQ people have faced their own history of harm, which has led communities to kind of create their own mutual aid and their own ways of supporting one another. Um, LGBTQ identities were pathologized as like mental illness until classified until the 70s and 80s. And in fact, they actually still are in some ways. Any youth who is transgender will oftentimes be diagnosed with conditions such as gender identity of childhood, transsexualism, or gender dysphoria, all of which are in the DSM or other diagnostic manuals, and very much make it so being trans is perceived as an illness or as something that needs cured. And it's a requirement for a lot of treatment or gender affirming care. Um, Conversion therapy includes attempts to cure sexual orientation and or gender identity. While there is some bans throughout the United States, they are not consistent, and a lot of them only ban medical professionals. They do not ban people like churches, and community groups. So it's still a widespread issue. Discrimination in care. A lot of providers who were hostile, unknowledgeable, or refuse treatment to this day. A lack of understanding around trans people, or like really high rates of LGBTQ people facing like lower standards of care, especially when we get into OB-GYN or pregnancy, and then exclusion from services. Systems that don't recognize or address LGBTQ experiences. A really common example is when you fill out your family history and it says mother and father. And so you fill all of that. Okay, fine. That makes sense biologically, but then you go to the next thing and your only options are male or female for identity. And if you try to explain, a lot of times you just get that weird look of, but it's biological, and there's just not a lot of options to really fit in your own identity and how you express yourself, because that is something that's really important. LGBTQ people face higher rates of a lot of illnesses, addiction, mental health concerns, and it's an important part of a holistic care. Next slide. Um, LGBTQ communities have always been creating their own support systems. So for a lot of LGBTQ people, family may not be involved or might be very against their identity, homophobic, transphobic. And so chosen family networks are a big thing, whether it's a local or a wider scale in state or national. Community centers are safe havens during times of crisis. This originally was oftentimes bars and clubs and stuff, and has evolved nowadays into much more widespread community centers. Peer-led support groups when professional help hasn't been available. Examples like GLSEN, PFLAG, GSAs, and then activism and advocacy as a form of collective healing. We are about to reach the anniversary of Stonewall, and that's one of the biggest examples of LGBTQ advocacy and like collective mutual aid. It started from something and it blossomed into a huge battle that is still ongoing but has made amazing strides. So peer support builds on this rich tradition of community support and care. Next slide.
Well, what is youth peer support? So, a peer can be anyone we relate to, and this connection might be based on shared experiences, age, gender, cultural background, sexual orientation, or other aspects of identity. So, when we face something difficult, we often turn to people who have been there before as peers and as people who are seeking peer services. And in youth mental health, peer support means one young person to another young person. Next slide. So, peer support is a framework rather than a program. So, youth peer support comes in different forms and settings, but in general, support provided by young people with mental health experience is crucial and is based on shared understanding, respect, and mutual empowerment. It's non-clinical, but complementary to professional services, and it definitely provides a way to reduce stigma and to increase help-seeking behavior. And it creates authentic conversations and connections where young people already are, and it meets people where they're at. Oh, can you go back a few slides?
Yeah, I jumped to the end.
Still
think.
Slide 10.
Oh, can we actually go back because there's other two bullet points? So youth peer support isn't a singular program. So it's really a huge way of reimagining the way that we seek and look at mental health itself. So it's how communities support young people's well-being, which is such a crucial topic that we talk about nowadays with mental health, with being of different identities, including being LGBTQ plus, as well as just navigating the hardships that come to play into everyday reality and everyday living. And it's also the essential role that youth play in that support. I think sometimes it can be common for us to be sort of paternalistic towards youth and expect that they don't know what they want or how they feel, but they do. And that's the importance of peer support where there's that mutual arrangement and that mutual engagement. Next slide.
One thing I did also just want to think kind of add is recognizing that peer support, youth peer support is especially important for LGBTQ youth because we have lost a lot of older LGBTQ folk through various things, including the HIV and AIDS epidemic. And so sometimes turning to each other is one of the strongest and easiest forms. And it's important to keep in mind that historical context.
Definitely. So this is a continuum of youth peer support. So embedded peers into all youth serving systems, so mental health services, youth mental health spaces, and other youth service systems that may exist, such as clubs, sports, maybe a youth group outside, and really embedding and making sure that's inclusive in there, and also spending time to go where young people are at. So once again, those locations of peer support groups or youth groups, sports, school clubs, maybe choir, and making sure that you interact with the youth at those spaces as well. And then making sure to train young people too, because once again, peer support is mutual. And with being LGBTQ plus, with everything that is happening, taking place, and also the historical reference that Quinn also mentioned earlier, it's so crucial to be able to have those spaces so that queer youth can depend on queer youth as we look at a historical lens and everything that's going on today. Next slide. So there's three different things we're going to go over. So there's the first one, which is universal approaches. The second is targeted approaches. And the third one is integrated approaches. And you can click to the next slide. And we're going to go through the universal approaches first. So level one is training all young people. So universal approaches build mental health literacy. So regarding general support skills, peer-led mental health education, and creating a culture of support. Peer support, there is ways to train young people on how to do it, which is so crucial so that they can provide support with their peers. And being able to have a peer-led mental health education is so crucial so that you can share that with those that you're engaging with. And also creating that culture of support is crucial because without that foundation, how is there that comfortability, especially when it comes to the historicalness of what LGBTQ plus people have faced as youth as well as adults? And some organizations that are listed down below are the Mental Health First Aid. They have a youth mental health aid kit that exists that sort of walks you through how to navigate mental health for youth and young adults and teenagers and adolescents. There's ASK, so Acknowledge, Support, and Keep in Touch, which is a great acronym when being involved within peer support. There's the Youth Aware of Mental Health, and there's QPR, which is Question, Persuade, and Refer. And there's also organizations like the Support Network and Born This Way Foundation. And Born This Way Foundation truly focuses on a lot of LGBTQ plus youth between the ages of 13 and 24, I believe. And it's an organization that is national and really focuses on providing support to queer youth and is just an overall great organization to really plug in. Next slide.
So I'm going to talk about the second level, which is targeted approaches of youth peer support. Next slide. So level two is going to where young people are. This is oftentimes online spaces like social media, text, This can include schools, after school clubs, um, sorry, public spaces like YMCA's, girls and boys clubs, like things like that. Some really common examples are GSAs, which are or gay straight alliances, which are also known as sexuality and gender alliance. And it is kind of an after school club typically where LGBTQ youth and allies can meet together, whether it's a support thing versus advocacy and certain fundraising. It kind of depends on the GSA, but it's really a space for youth to kind of come together and just be themselves. The Trevor Project is an online support for LGBTQ youth. This is especially important right now with the defunding of the LGBTQ specific line for 988. That funding will be ending on July 17th. And so youth can still call 988, but they will no longer be connected to LGBTQ specific resources. So it's really important to remember and recognize and kind of promote things like Trevor Project and the Trans Lifeline that allow youth to kind of reach out to connect to somebody who is queer or understands being queer. Other options include there's some in Florida, some youth alliances, peer support spaces like identity groups, just things like that that you can kind of come to a space that is set, that's in their community or within their system and find community and support. So next slide. And then level 3 is integrated approaches, which next slide, please, is kind of embedding peers in the systems. And I'm going to tag team this one with Deb. So this is directly putting youth peer supporters into the systems like the mental health system, the juvenile justice system, the foster care system and child protective system, things like that. So having a dedicated physical space, kind of integrate into a clinic or some other kind of support system, and then other things, like I said, social services, juvenile justice, etc. Some options locally within Cincinnati that I want to uplift is Transform Cincinnati, which is a organization that started as just a way for trans youth to kind of donate clothing that did not represent their gender or connect to them and receive free clothing that fit their identity, as well as things like wigs, binders, etc., to help gender presentation, and is now blossomed into a massive building that allows youth to not only change clothing and or get clothing for cheap or free, but also support groups. They offer things like Thanksgiving dinners for youth who don't have a family to celebrate Thanksgiving with, and other like really amazing events. Another one is Hey, or Hopeful Empowered Youth. It is a coalition I actually work with that is working to specifically hire Black and Brown youth, system involved youth, and LGBTQ youth to work within the systems and continue to advocate to get more youth peer supporters, as well as things like policy and school support. So getting the youth who have experienced it into the systems is just crucial. And I think Deb can talk a lot more of that as someone who does peer support.
Yeah, definitely. So Peer Support Space is an organization that focuses on being peer-led and peer-focused. So we have our identity-based groups, like there's the Black LGBTQ plus space. There's a space for queer women, whether they're cis, trans, or non-binary, and trans men. There's also spaces such as Be Kind to Your Mind that focus on overall mental health, and our daily community gathering spaces that take place a couple times a week where people can meet either at 12 p.m. or at 6 p.m. to be in a space where they can share how they feel and sort of have a wheel to discuss that. And there's other groups as well, such as many other groups that focus on other identities that are very important, that definitely need space. And as well, we have Eva's Casita, which is a peer respite in Central Florida, the first peer respite in Central Florida. And we take anyone between the ages of 18 and above, honestly. So it's not youth who are adolescents, but or at least who are minors, but those who are 18 plus can utilize their services and the overnight services here in Orlando, Florida. So you can stay between 1 to 6 nights at the respite or 1 to 7 days at the respite. And it's really an empowering space where folks can really come in to do what they need to do. We don't really police people. We don't do any of that. If they need support from us, we have a 24/7 team on deck that can provide support in whatever ways. We have activities that we do. and people are able to leave because, Orlando, we have Mickey Mouse and we have Universal and different parks. So if they want to go there during the day and they had the means to go, they can. Or if they wanted to stay at the respite the whole entire time or whole entire day, they can do that too. And we really just allow it to be an alternative space for folks to really be there for their mental health well-being and to have direction and empowerment to do what they need to do. And to also spin off of what Quinn was mentioning with one of the organizations in Cincinnati providing resources for youth, there's the Queer Trans Project, and they're a nationwide based organization, but they're based in Jacksonville, Florida, and they provide gender affirming attire and gender affirming items through their Build a Queer kits, which they do quarterly. They recently had one actually earlier this June that launched on their website where folks were able to go online and make their orders for free. And then the team ships those items to folks who are in need of gender affirming care, whether they're trans masculine or trans feminine or anything in between. And it's just a great resource for folks who need resources. And they have a love line that exists as well that's been up on their YouTube for anyone who needs any queer aspiring or queer affirming or trans affirming messaging if folks are going through or navigating through tough times. Next slide.
Great. So I'm actually going to spend a bit more time on this slide since we're a bit ahead of schedule. So right now, a big part of supporting LGBTQ youth is creating welcoming spaces, both physically, but also when one-on-ones or digitally. So a big thing is using language that includes everyone, even if you assume that everyone in a room is straight or not and not trans cis. It doesn't hurt to say something like, "Hey everyone," or "Hey y'all, I love y'all. I was raised with Southern family. It's my baby." And then I moved, and then when I came out, I found out it was such a big thing anyway, and I was like, "It's perfect." Ask for and use the correct pronouns routinely, not some special thing or when you think of it. Like, make an effort to always be using it and recognize that gender goes beyond pronouns. If someone is a trans woman and uses she, her, then she will likely also would use terms like female, woman, girl, and like compliments like pretty, beautiful, like really think in a holistic view, not just a pronoun or term. Don't be afraid to ask how to use certain pronouns or terminology. I use they, them pronouns, and I know for some people that can be kind of confusing, but if someone's just asking, that's great. I would rather explain it than have someone assume or just refuse to use them because it's a really easy conversation and it's great to hear people who want to um, use it correctly. Using terminology like parent or guardian, sibling, family, instead of assuming traditional family structure. Some people, and that's something that's actually inclusive to youth who have been or orphans or in foster care or other situations, because it's just kind of assuming like, hey, who's your guardian or parents? Some examples for like educators, if you send home a permission slip that it says legal guardian one, legal guardian two, or parent one, parent two, um, asking like, hey, what like when you're doing, I don't know, an assignment with younger kids about draw your family. Like if somebody draws two women, don't immediately assume, oh, is that your mom and your sister? Like it could be both their moms, it could be that, it could be whatever. And like let the person explain their identity and their life. And then don't and like avoid assumptions about relationships. Terms like partner versus girlfriend and boyfriend. And also recognizing like it's a little weird if you like that let's say like I'm a lesbian. So if you know that I'm gay and you're like every single time we talk, you're like, so are you dating any girls? Like treat me the same as you would anybody else in a relationship. You don't have to ask invasive questions. You wouldn't for anyone else. Understand like family dynamics. Family rejection is common. I personally am no contact with most of my family due to my queer identity. And so chosen family, like my friends, my partner, are things that are really important to me. So don't assume that family support exists. A big thing is like, for example, college age youth, a lot of forms are going to ask for an emergency contact. So something small could be, hey, who can we pick as an emergency contact who is going to understand your medical situation, but doesn't have to be connected to biological family. And understand that coming out is not a one-time event. It's an ongoing process. I have been out as transgender since I first came out at 13, and I still have to come out all the time because when I open up a webinar and I have to say I use they, them pronouns, that's a form of coming out right there that I'm doing 5 years later. And it's continuous. And also, identity is fluid and things change, especially like younger folks and teenagers. And also recognizing like like context of like somebody who might have been raised super religious might be struggling with an identity and not ready right away. Some things can change, and that's okay. We all change. Your favorite color 10 years ago is not your favorite color now, most likely. And then like familiarize yourself with current mandated reporting policies as they relate to LGBTQ youth and make it extremely clear to the youth that you serve. We are not asking you to skirt around the law, but make sure you communicate to youth. For example, in Ohio, I don't remember exactly when it starts, but coming up, if a youth discloses or even suggests that they might be transgender or LGBTQ in any way, it is a call home to parents under an emotional or physical change. This includes asking to use a different name or pronouns. Okay, July 1st then. Thank you. Different name, different pronouns, asking about using a different bathroom, even if they don't explicitly state that they are LGBTQ. So let your youth know. And also, if you do have to make that mandated reporting, be aware that there are not current like that not all states have exceptions for struggling family situations. So be as like communicate with the youth. If you do have to make that call, let them know and support them. Support them before while making that call. Invite them in to make that call if you can. Whatever you can do to kind of support youth, because this is a really big time for a lot of youth, and we need all the help and support that we can. It's crucial.
Yeah,
I think next, yeah, Deborah.
something
Sorry.
too. So I live in Florida and I do my work here in Florida as well. And back 3 years ago, we had a bill called Don't Say Gay, which is sort of similar to what Quinn is referring to what's going to affect in Ohio. And there are those similar bills. So I just really want to hone in on that point to truly, really be communicative and be upfront about what is there and what exists. So that there is that empowerment piece too, so that youth know what they can say and what not to say for their own protection as well, because not everyone comes from an affirming home, unfortunately. I know for me that I haven't. I was raised in a really religious household that is not really career affirming. So if I was a youth right now, it would be hard to navigate that and know what lines to cross and know who to trust. So definitely being honest with you is really important, especially as we navigate these times. So we're definitely going to be tag teaming this as well with what not to do as an adult and what to do. So I'll start with the not to do, of course. So don't rush to pathologize or fix things. That's a huge thing when it comes to peer support. And that was something that I was taught while I was learning how to do peer support and what I do as a respite peer supporter at Evskasita. So, gender exploration and questioning are normal parts of development. Everyone goes through their own journey when it comes to gender, sexuality, and who they are overall. So, as we all have gone through our own journeys and our own lived experiences, it's just so crucial for us to not push things onto others and to not fix and to make sure that if there are solutions or people are wanting solutions, to ask if they do want that. And community and belonging can be healing without professional intervention. Sometimes people just want to yap or just want to talk. I know as someone who works at a respite, there are some folks who come in who they don't want the advice. They don't want to be told what to do. They already have their system or network in place of those who provide that. So sometimes, someone might want to yap about what they're going through or yap about what's going on in everyday life, or we just might want to play a board game or play Mario Kart or do karaoke. So definitely being intentional and recognizing how people are showing up and what they want to show up in and how they want to. And honestly, just resisting the urge to immediately give advice. And I know that can be super duper hard. It's very easy to want to go in and fix things so quickly because we don't want people to go through the situations that they go through. But at the same time, that is not on us to force people into anything. this is someone else's journey, and we have to always remember that through youth, especially too.
One thing that I like love to do when I'm doing, so I don't do peer support directly, but like when I'm talking with my friends or in a community space, if somebody comes with a problem, hey, today at work was awful. Okay, do you want to just rant or do you want advice? Like start immediately asking that boundary and ask it every time. Don't just assume that because somebody wanted advice one time, they want it every time. It's pretty easy to quickly throw it in. And then if they want to rant, let them. And if they need advice, give what you can. But when you can't, like when you don't have the right answer, there isn't a right answer, turn to other supports. None of us know everything.
Yeah, for sure. And I definitely agree with that point too, because sometimes you're not going to know what to say, and maybe sometimes you might not have that exact lived experience, but is that conversation that y'all can have and gauging how they're feeling and really asking them, is that's going to help you know how to move in the next steps or next direction. And the issue is often societal rejection, not the identity itself. So focus on building resilience and community connection, because oftentimes some people don't have community, like we focused on before. Some people, their chosen family is their family, and chosen family is as valid as someone's biological or extended family. And it's very important to take people's chosen family seriously, especially when it comes to LGBTQ plus folks. There's a long history of chosen family through even Black LGBTQ plus culture through ballroom. And ballroom was where they had different rounds or competitions where people would compete, and there were different houses that would compete, and they built community and social justice and just joy through that. And a lot of people, their house is their family. So it's very important, even if you don't understand, to take that seriously and to never tell someone that their chosen family is not their family. Also, don't force disclosure or categorization. So come as you are, no pressure to label or come out. And I think that's very important. Not everyone has the same coming out experience or the same coming out story. And like Quinn said too, oftentimes coming out is a process that happens frequently, like with sharing our pronouns or depending on what space you're in with your sexuality. Like those are things that are ongoing. And respect that some youth may not be ready or interested in discussing their identity. I know for me, when I was super younger, because of where I was raised and how I was raised, it was a little bit uncomfortable for me to be more forthcoming about my sexuality at the time. So definitely respect folks and don't push that onto folks, and that includes youth. And recognize the cultural connections that many LGBTQ plus youth have that might intersect with their identity. For instance, I'm Black and I'm queer. So I'm also non-binary. So those are different elements of my identity, and there's intersectionality. Not one piece can be removed. It all works in tandem. And there's also, Two-Spirit and Native American people who also have multiple different identities as well. So definitely be considerate of that. And never, never out a young person to others, including other students or other staff. You don't know how word can spread. And for some folks, being out is really deadly and can lead to very negative consequences. And honestly, it's just a respect as well, even if that isn't a negative consequence for the person.
And like I mentioned earlier, we recognize current legal obligations occasionally, but also maybe try to avoid talking about like it's awful, but like try to avoid having to report it by just don't directly tell me because like disclosing early prevents later reporting. Um, and also like I will say with like chosen family, like recognize the support systems can be very vast. Like I know for me, I have a group that does meetings and they have a childcare room right next door. So I like that's a big thing and there's a lot of historical context to that. And it might seem a little bit confusing, or it might not be like oh, she's like a sister to me. It might just be like, this is my friend and she's my family. I was looking at something. Oh, the other thing I wanted to mention with like outing and stuff is recognizing that just because a youth is out doesn't necessarily mean they're out in every way. I'm pretty openly not like agender and a lesbian, but if I'm going to go visit, like if I do have to go visit family that are my family in rural Kentucky that are extremely Catholic, like Southern Baptist and Catholic, there's no way I'm saying anything about my gender. Like it's very situational, and especially right now with the political extremism on both sides, like the divisiveness, you don't know who's safe always. So either, if possible, a big thing, especially trans youth, if someone's a trans mask and uses he him, try to use they them with everyone, just neutral, so you're not going in either way. And talk to youth. Would you rather me use your birth name, or would you rather me use this name? Like, what works for the youth and what situations? And kind of keep that conversation going. I think we can go to the next slide. Okay, and then I'll kind of tag team with you on this one, Deb, but some resources for adult allies. So locally, find your local PFLAG chapter, find LGBTQ community centers, pride centers, things like, for example, Cincinnati Pride does do the festival and parade, but they also do year-round events. GSAs and like affinity groups, which also might be known as Sexuality and Gender Alliance, are clubs within a school. And then this is more situational, but like some activism groups or political groups will kind of overlap with LGBTQ groups. Some groups for Black, Brown, and Indigenous youth or people will overlap. There's actually a big historical overlap with sex work groups and addiction groups and LGBTQ youth. So, like, recognize that it might not be advertised so plainly, but there's so many different ways. Nationally, the Trevor Project, especially with the defunding of 988, youth can call, text, or message at any time I need to look at the exact hours, but you can generally message and get support for crisis, suicidal thinking, family situations. I personally have called them before and had a great experience. And they do have a safe exit button on their website that you can hit, and it'll erase your search history so it looks like you on Google. So it's safe for youth to use at any time. Trans Lifeline, Southern Equality, Transgender Law Center. That is especially important right now with some of the legislation around gender markers and legal name changes. If you have a concern, consult with them. Like, it's important to find somebody who's affirming. And then the Black LGBTQ Migrant Project, which, Deb, do you have more information on that? I am not super familiar.
Yeah, so the Black LGBTQ Migrant Project, they are housed underneath the Transgender Law Center a little bit, where they focus on Black LGBTQ plus folks around the country and around the world. So if someone's a migrant, there's various definitions of that, or is Black and LGBTQ plus, they provide a lot of support and training and resources for folks. And I also wanted to plug in again the Queer Trans Project. They also have a safe exit button. So if you need to quickly exit out of it, you can do that. And if there are youth around you and like it's not a difficult thing, because I know everyone's navigating different legalities and stuff like that. They're a great resource for folks who just need items to really reflect the gender that they are. And they also provide a lot of other things, such as gender affirming flights as well. So if someone needs to travel for surgery or for any type of thing that is for their safety, that's also available for folks to utilize as well.
And in general, you could tend to like look up or find resources like free binder programs, free gender affirming products. I know one specific group, I don't remember the name, but like there's a relocation group that will help move people to Colorado who are in like, just there's a lot of different little things that you can like kind of look up and find. And oftentimes some of these local PFLAG LGBTQ centers will be a great place to start because they can kind of expand. I know we're going to go into our Q&A, but I did see some stuff in the chat about rural communities, and I did want to talk about it a little bit as someone who I lived a bit more rural in Ohio and then moved to Cincinnati, but was raised still that much more conservative Catholic outlook. And a big thing, honestly, when possible, online support, because obviously that's going to be the easiest way to kind of connect with things, and a lot of these groups can be done through social media, so that way it's not an LGBTQ specific website if a youth is unable to come out, or safe exit buttons, which, just to clarify, it's like a little, like, you can press escape 3 times and it clears the search history, looks like you're just on Google. Super helpful. When internet access is spotty or there's too many like family restrictions on internet, just checking in when they can. I know what a lot of people, like all the queer people in a small town, will kind of just hang out, try and find that. So if you know anybody else who might be older in LGBTQ in a city who's willing to be a mentor, like kind of make those connections and facilitate them. And if that's not possible, then at least try to be an opening ear and kind of a reminder that like things do get better, that a lot of things can be very difficult for LGBTQ youth, but once you turn 18, there's a lot more freedoms. And while there's a lot going on, LGBTQ people have survived so many things, and resistance is like surviving is resistance, and being queer is inherently resistance, and that's awesome. And they should be insanely proud of that. And that they're just like queer is beautiful and black is beautiful and all these things. It's just what makes us human. And it's good to remember when things get tough. I think we can go to the next slide. I think that's Q&A. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, thank you guys. We are going to go into a Q&A that I'm sure Jackie will reach out, but here are some emails. If any of you want to reach out to Isaac, me, Deb, or Jackie, the other Jackie who helped us create these slides, and you can also join the National Advocacy Network, which will kind of give updates on current legislation as well as where you can kind of connect in to kind of advocate for the things that are going to help mental health, peer support, and all these things.
Absolutely. Quinn, Deb, thank you so much. All of that information was so helpful and so needed at this point in time. And I just want to thank you both for being advocates for the LGBTQ plus community and for being peers in the mental health space and advocating for peers. It's so wonderful. It's so needed. So just a huge thank you to you. Thanks everyone in our audience. I'm going to stop screen sharing, but don't worry if you didn't get these emails and information. I will be sending all of that in our recap where you'll get the recording. I know there were a few questions. Can I get the recording of this? Yes, we will send it out by the end of the week. Be sure to share it. I know that was packed full of such great information and some really just great ways to break down, simple do's and don'ts, some good ways that allies can be involved and supportive, and ways if you are identifying as LGBTQ plus and looking for that peer support, you can start to reach out. I want to remind people, feel free to continue putting questions in the chat. I know we have about 15 minutes. I've loved reading everyone's own experiences, your comments. So thank you for sharing, and thanks, Quinn, for jumping in on that rural one. I want to expand on that a little and ask you from your perspective. I know I've talked to a few youth in rural areas who have said, when I was growing up, I didn't even know one other queer person. And it's really hard because, again, too, if you're in these rural areas where there might not be other queer people, but they also don't feel safe coming out, how do you know and find that community? And I'd also just love to hear, for the allies in the room, and maybe it's adults or maybe it's other youth, how can, as someone in the LGBTQ plus community, how would an ally, best create a space where if someone's coming out and doesn't know anyone else in their small rural area to go to, how do you make yourself that safe space? I know it's not quite the same, you're not relating on that level of identity, but how can people living in rural areas make sure that youth feel really safe coming out to them?
I think one big thing with like that I remember growing up. So you're right. I didn't even really know queer people were a thing. Like I had a very, very weird like understanding. The most I kind of knew was like a little bit because of Glee, which looking back, not the most comprehensive representation, but it was something. And I think it really depends on the area because sometimes rural areas can be in a more accepting area, but there's just not a lot of people, and sometimes more often it's a very conservative area. A big thing that's kind of been historically in the LGBTQ community and still kind of is a thing is like flagging of some kind. So wearing a pin, lesbians often do like a carabiner. I've seen handkerchief. Like there's a lot of different ways that people can kind of like stealthily indicates that they are LGBTQ. A big thing, like if you're a teacher at a school or a counselor or something, I would say like introducing yourself with pronouns. Hi, my name is Quinn and I'm one of the counselors here and I use they them. It's such a little thing that kind of automatically makes it seem a bit more safe to kind of open up about that. Um, if you are LGBTQ, obviously it depends on your safety, your preferences, but like if you're able to put up a flag, a sign, a photo of you and your wife or your son and his husband, whatever kind of scenario to kind of normalize it because it is normal, but a lot of us don't see that representation. So seeing one photo can mean the world.
Yeah.
Deb, I don't know if you have anything.
So I never really lived necessarily in the most rural area. I sort of, I guess, did in the Tampa Bay area in a little town called Lano Lakes, but I never saw anyone who was black and queer when I was growing up. It was usually through media that I saw that. And it's really until I got into college or moved to more of a bigger metropolitan area where I really got to see that more. So I think it's really important if there are folks who are black and queer, kind of speaking off my lived experiences, to really show up and really be authentically yourself. I know there's different legislation once again that's taking place, especially down here in Florida, but I know for me, if I would have saw that growing up, it would have meant so much to me because of just so many cultural things that I had to navigate through. And I feel like if I saw someone who was black and queer, it would have made me a little bit more comfortable within my identity when I was younger, and I would have felt more of a space within this community. And I really am so glad to see more folks being in that space themselves. Like I have a friend who works in schools who she's queer and openly queer, and I just think it's very beautiful that she's able to do that and be a support system for students for the work that she does. So I just want to see more of that. And I think really it's so important because oftentimes it can feel that Black LGBTQ plus folks and Black LGBTQ youth are not represented enough. And if you are of that identity, like your work and your ethic and everything is so important, especially in the times that we're in right now.
And I also do want to uplift, like it's like a common thought or conception that like if oh, but if young children see a gay person, they're gonna become gay or they're gonna be confused, they're not gonna understand. Kids are so they don't care, they're whatever. You could tell a kid the sky is blue because of magical elephants, and they'd be like, okay, and they'd run off on their day. Like they're not hate is learned and it's taught. It's not ingrained in you, but love is. I know last year I got to go to San Francisco for a work conference and I went to this little restaurant and my server was a guy in a skirt and the table next to me was a queer couple who was openly kissing in a public space and I was so shocked because that's just not what you did to in my like where I was living. It was a pretty conservative Catholic area and I was just like, "Oh my gosh, that's so magical. Like that's awesome that you can just do that safely." And it meant the world to me and I was 18 and it meant the world to me. Like imagine that to somebody who's not out. It means so much to see one thing sometimes.
No, definitely. And I feel too, because I moved to Florida 10 years ago and I used to live in Pennsylvania. And around 10 years ago, that's when gay marriage was legalized. And it made me feel like at that moment, like, wow, like there is actually a chance for me to like actually be with someone who I do love. And I think that's very important. And being able to see other people who are Black and queer as I was navigating my identity through media and even through college, like that's so impactful. Like I see someone I think Laura mentioned as a Black queer professional who's super out. The visibility absolutely does make a difference. And you're absolutely right, Lauren. Like it does. And it gives people hope because some youth may feel like, okay, like what's the point of me being here? Like, do I have a chance in love? Do I have a chance of success? Can I be within a career? And when we see people who are represented, that shows them, yes, you can. And there's still light at the end of the tunnel, even though you might not have the most affirming people around you at home or in your family.
Yeah, thank you both for that. Really insightful, and thank you, Lauren, for your comment too. Um, I want to bring up, based on a few things that you're saying, and actually a conversation I was having with a colleague this morning. These conversations are so important at this point in time, when communities are facing additional challenges, more attack, more hate coming their way, whether it be through individual experiences or legislation that's aimed to harm a certain community. It puts advocacy in a challenging position because you want to be an advocate, you want to have your voice heard to be able to support your community. But for a lot of people that identify within that community, then putting yourself in that position can make you feel unsafe. And that can be scary too. And I'm just wondering how you both, as advocates, are starting to navigate this point in time of having your voice heard, advocating for your community, but making sure that you're protecting your own safety and your mental health.
Yeah,
I-
It's a big question.
Go ahead, Deb.
I feel that honestly, like self-care is a huge part of it. 'Cause I do a lot of advocacy work within mental health, but I also do advocacy work in other realms as well, in social justice and stuff like that. And with being in Florida, there's been a lot of tensions within legislative sessions, but there have also been wins, even though there's been huge losses as well. And I think sometimes it's very important to focus on the prize. um there's not always going to be this win where it's like this glossing like big bill that gets passed, especially when we think about the South or even the Midwest. But maybe your win is, okay, this legislative session, no anti-LGBTQ plus legislation was passed. And that is a huge win because that makes sure that students are not being for more marginalized or more going through more suffering. Or maybe the win is that your state's court decided, no, this bill is actually ridiculous and we're overturning it because y'all went too far with that. So I think it's just really important to focus on that too and recognize that, even though it feels like loses or losses are happening so consistently, the why you're doing the work is for the community, is for your community. It might even be for your younger self and how you're able to show up because no one might have showed up when you were younger and when you were queer. So I think it's really important to realize that and also realize that it's a community effort. You're not going to be the only one in this fight. Sometimes it may feel that way, especially when it comes to education and working with youth. But there's a plethora of people across the country or even within your own community who are going to be there, who feel similarly to you and who support the efforts that you push through as well.
I really love what Deb was saying, and I think perspective taking and putting things into the context is important. Website translegislation.com tracks trans legislation, and like yes, there are definitely bills that have been passed, but there's a lot more that were not passed, that were only introduced and never passed. Oh, there's another website I want to say, Good News Network, maybe, like looking at positive news and trying to minimize the amount of negative news that you take in a day. Something for me is I check the news once a day, first thing in the morning, maybe sometimes at night if something really big's going on in a day, but I don't have notifications turned on. I refuse to look at CNN or anything else unless it's that time of the day. Um, I also, big thing I like to recommend is kind of balance. So because I'm trans, I don't, oftentimes in public spaces, I'm going to be called my, like whatever I'm perceived. I'm not going to be called they, them. And I've made peace with that personally through therapy and stuff, but I try to have a balance. When I was a server and I knew I was going to work an 8-hour shift and nobody was going to use the right pronouns, the first thing I did after I got off was I would call my girlfriend, and knew that she was a safe space. And I knew that like Wednesdays is a local group of mine that does a game night that's super queer affirming, and kind of trying to find some balance, recognizing that, unfortunately right now it's very difficult to find always being safe, but how can we minimize unsafety and how can we cope with unsafe spaces and unsafe people? And how do we set boundaries? Like helping youth learn how to set boundaries and really kind of setting to them that you don't have to go to this space, you don't have to speak to this person. Someone, I saw in the chat, but the blood of the, oh, way to go, of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. Like really reiterating that, like, it doesn't have to be your mom. Your mom can be any person on this planet. It doesn't have to be the one who gave birth to you. I know we're like running short on time, so I did see a question in chat that was asking about oh, where to go. Oh no, I lost it. There's so many different things in chat. Ah. Maybe if you see anything else, Jackie, then, because I thought I saw something, but it might have gone and lost.
Oh, good. I know I was trying to make sure we got to
Oh,
everything. Yeah, go for it, Quinn.
given all the diversity, how critical is it just to meet with others who are diverse versus meeting with someone who shares your particular diversity? So I'm white, so I don't want to speak too much on like BIPOC youth and stuff, but I know for me, in like the trans community, it's a big thing that like you people who get it, and I see it a lot in women's spaces. People who get it, and I think it's important to have that, but I also think it's important when you feel safe and able to do so to connect with a wider community of people who may not fully share your identity, your experiences, or your beliefs, because there's a lot to learn. And there's honestly a lot of intersection. I have a friend who is Jewish and not queer, but my experience as a disabled person and a queer person has connections to that. And these different like celebration of identity is kind of something that's important in all marginalized communities. And I think you can really find that in a broad area. And I think I'm at my happiest now having a very, very diverse group of friends than when I was almost exclusively people in my school that was predominantly white, straight, and Catholic.
Yeah, I can add to that a little bit too. I think like there's an importance in both. Like Quinn was saying, like that safety component is really crucial. And a lot of times I know I have felt the most safest and joy when I've been in Black and queer spaces where both people are like both identities are there. So I'm with Black queer people overall, and it's just been a joy. But I know as someone who's an advocate, who's someone who is a leader within my community, it's important to also go outside and teach other folks. But I also want to encourage folks too that if you have engaged with people who are BIPOC or who are LGBTQ plus and you're not those identities or who's disabled or etc., like be willing to also maybe educate others too who share other identities with you because maybe that could come from a better place of understanding. And I don't want to use labor as a term because I think that it can get a little bit like juicy over there, but I think it's important to, as allies or as accomplices, to show up when we can. Like I'm not a trans woman, but have so many trans women friends, and if I gotta be the one to have the conversation with someone who doesn't understand terminology, yes, I'm non-binary, but I will go ahead and be the person to do it because I don't
Yeah.
want my girls to have to be frustrated because they have to already navigate a lot. So just like reading the room as much as possible, being an ally and advocate when you can, and showing up.
And I kind of like to connect it to a metaphor. Like, imagine if every single day you walked outside, you had somebody come up to you who was like, yeah, protect the dolls, yes. But was like, so why are you wearing your shirt? What does that black shirt mean? Why are you wearing it? Like every single day you have to explain yourself in and out, every room you're walking into. That's exhausting, especially after years and years. And if somebody else could say, oh, they're wearing that shirt because they like the color black, and then they go, oh, what is the color black? And they explain, then boom, that's a weight off your chest. And it also might be that way if somebody says something that might be a little bit outdated or a little bit harsh and stuff, then it's not going directly to you. It's going to an ally who can then explain, like, hey, we don't use that term anymore, or hey, that's not a super appropriate question. And it just saves a lot of grief on both sides.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
love our allies.
We do. I love that. There's always ways, no matter where you are, if you're a part of the community or if you're an ally to the community, that you can show up. And if you're a part of the community, relying on those allies to be able to take the burden away sometimes. Because it is exhausting to Quinn's point of it's not just coming out once, it's every day, multiple times a day, in multiple conversations. I know we're just over our time, so I want to thank everyone for staying these few extra minutes and being here today for this really important conversation. Quinn, Deb, thank you so much. You both are so wise and such great advocates for this community, and I want to thank you for being here and for being a part of MHA's youth programs. because you truly are doing such incredible work, and we are lucky to have you and to have leaders like you that will carry on this work for generations to come.
Yes,
Thank you.
and thank you everyone who came. Like we said, email us if there's a question. We are happy to take that.
Yes.
Be shy.
Absolutely. Just a
Okay.
reminder, we'll be sending out the recording as well, so feel free to share this widely. It's such an important message, so the link will be coming within the next week. We will send you information to get in touch with Devin Quinn and Jackie and Isaac. So if you have additional questions and want to connect with them, you can. But thank you all so much. I hope everyone has a great rest of their day and enjoys the last week of Pride Month.
Yes.
Bye,
Bye. Happy Pride.
Pride.